Yeah, I should.
We're live now.
Okay, how do I get the link to tweet out
Let me
this to my following?
let me grab it real quick.
All right,
I
cool.
don't know how to do it before you go live. When I always grab
You
it.
got to log into your YouTube account,
Oh yeah,
and
yeah,
then you'll see it over there.
yeah. Let me grab that real quick. So
Cool.
what's going on, everybody? We got a kind of a different show today. Usually when I do these, I just draw.
Okay, neat.
The whole time.
Okay.
Which I draw, talk. I've had a long, silly career. Maybe I'm over on the other YouTube.
Right.
I have two YouTube channels here.
Okay.
So I tell stories about the road. You do a lot of conventions too, don't you?
I used to, back when conventions were around.
When that was the thing. I don't know which.
And I gotta say, like, what I find strange is that comic book conventions seem to have agreed to just say, no, we're not going to do this until later. Like they talk about next year. But sports cards conventions are going fairly routinely. Like I did one about 3 weeks ago or so. So I don't understand why the sports cards crew is like, let's get back to work. But the comics crew is like, we'll wait. So, but those two communities do seem to be acting a bit differently.
There's a lot of industries that are, I don't know if it's a political thing or a corporate thing, but
right.
The mainstream music business won't go back to work either.
Right.
They're remaining shut down, and there are independent bands that'll play shows.
It could be. I hate to speculate or be divisive, but it could be if you look at the political alignments of, say, the sports cards industry versus the political alignment of like the comic book or music industry. Who knows what conclusions you could draw?
Yeah, and I think the music industry is the same way, right? They're pretty left leaning, and they might be doing it. I hate to think that the entire year of 2020, the entire year of 2020 has been a giant corporate psyop. How insane is that?
Yeah.
I don't want to believe that. I don't want to believe. I'm over here looking at YouTube. We're actually on Facebook. That's why I can't find it.
Okay.
So I don't know how do you share Facebook streams? I can send you the direct link.
Share or
yeah. You just have to click share.
Don't worry about it. Not a big deal.
So anyway, this is Preston Poulter. He's joining us today in Strangeville. He was kind enough to join us. I'm not sure, Preston. I know we've retweeted each other a lot over on Twitter, and we've probably known of each other for a long time. Have we ever actually had a conversation?
To my knowledge, no.
I don't think we have.
I don't think so.
I realized that when I reached out to you, I was like, I don't know if I've ever talked to this dude before, but I've watched so many of your Comicsgate live streams and your Wednesday night writing.
The old days. Oh, the old those I still do.
I watched a little bit of your show last night. You had a good group of guests on last night.
Thanks. Yeah, no, I like doing them, and I got to say I'm proud of the result. Not in terms of YouTube views, because those are pretty abysmal, but in terms of like Darth Lunga, he was able to pull it out, and his campaign was successful. So Isidore and the Immortal Chains, that got its start on my channel, and now there it is. We have a new comic creator has entered the arena with a successful campaign, and we're going to be getting Samuel Erebus, the Primal Chaos thing, who's the winner of my contest, and an old screenwriting friend of mine, who was out there in LA in the trenches fighting the screenwriter war. He's going into comic books, so. And that's just been in like the last 6 months. So I seem to be influencing people who are creative and have a can-do attitude to step into the arena. And I think that's going to be very pleasant because I think amateur comic books has been, if you go back and we're watching, like the Comicsgate, stuff, how unprofessional these people were, how little they cared about their customer obligations. Or the law or professional ethics or any of that. So I'm
more to that though, and the reason I like your show on Wednesdays is there's in indie comics there's often a an emphasis on art and no emphasis at all on the writing. It's like
Right.
you can just oftentimes the artists themselves will just write whatever
Exactly.
script.
Yeah.
I believe there are a few of the bigger crowdfunder guys who admit to just drawing a bunch of pictures and then writing a script around those pictures later, which I could never do that. I am a visual writer and artist. I pay more attention to the visuals than I do the sort of prose style and the eloquence of my sentence structure and things like that. But I could never just draw a bunch of pictures and then try to write a story around that. So I like that
it's a losing formula. Right? I don't see how you could end up with anything that's going to be enduring.
I think in the 90s, didn't Rob Liefeld and Todd McFarlane talk about they did that? And so people just kind of ran with it. Like those two dudes are exceptions to the rule, first of all.
I've never heard of that. Like I heard of Liefeld being accused of leaving a lot of work for his colorist. Yeah.
Drawing all the shots from a downward angle, so it's just the sky. Yeah. So the colorist has to draw in whatever the fuck is behind the figures.
Exactly.
That's funny. That's funny stuff. That I have heard that story too, and you can just see it in the comics.
Right. But I was listening to a Todd McFarlane thing, that came out on YouTube. I don't know if it came out, but I was looking at it about a month ago, and I think it was probably released around then. But Todd McFarlane talking about his journey, if you will, and there was something that I was kind of thinking about myself in terms, putting the books together, or writing the script for the books, I should say, that Todd McFarlane talked about, since he brought up Todd McFarlane in writing, where he would look over the issue and say, visually, where's the big exciting shot that when you turn the page you're surprised, like, oh wow, and to give a big emotional moment, and that he would then make the pages before and after that scene, like immediately before and immediately after, more boring. He would tone those pages down.
Was he talking to Joe Quesada? Was that their interview? Is that when he talked about that, or did he talk about that in that little documentary they made about it?
The little documentary he made, yeah. So
yeah, I liked that. That was something as far as like comic writing theory that I hadn't necessarily considered consciously.
Yeah,
I do build to moments and do reveals on an opposite page and things like that, but I hadn't thought consciously about really lulling the audience into kind of a sense of security and then just smacking them in the face with something big. And that's something that, like, comic book psychology, that's what, and again, why I like your show on Wednesday is talking about the comic book psychology of writing here in the indie scene is really important, because there's not a lot of emphasis put on that.
Right. Yeah.
Because at the end of the day,
at
the end of the day, we want to give people a great alternative to mainstream comics, and you can't give people a great alternative just by hiring the best artists. You also need great storytelling.
And to me, I look at it and I go, you really need to approach this like a business, because it is. And if you enter this like a business, then you have to look at the majors as your competitors, which they are. Which is not to say you're going to go beat them in sales. That's not the goal. The goal is, if Marvel and DC are your competitors, you have to answer a very simple question, and that's, why should anyone buy from you? And
I like to think of it as like counter programming.
Right.
If you've got a big blockbuster movie like an Avengers that comes out in the theater, what gets counter programmed in the theaters next to it? That people that aren't necessarily looking for that, but are going to the movies with people that are. Right. How do you find them? And to me, that's what indie comics has always been. I've always gone to indie comics for stories that are different from the mainstream comics.
Right. But
they have to be good. They have to be just as good, just as compelling.
And that's where you've just touched upon it. What you offer the audience are what, in business theory, this is called a USP, a unique selling proposition. Meaning, maybe maybe you can't beat your competitors on price, but why should they buy? Come up with what's your unique selling proposition. And when it comes to indie comics, strangely enough, I think it's if you can offer excellent writing, because sadly that's not something you're getting at the majors. And I don't want to bag on the major writers, but let's face it, what are they at this point but simply portfolio managers for IPs that, you know, are being, you know, shipped in and out of movies. So they can't change that character. You know, that character is pretty much in stasis that they've been in since, you know, the 1960s, effectively. So you can't really offer any kind of particularly dynamic storytelling. And you know, because the perception at a lot of these comic book, you know, the major labels and whatnot, is that people are just buying it because of the logo. And why does the writer really matter anyway? Like, really, people are, you know, if they're first buying it for Batman or Spider-Man, then they're going to go, who's the artist? And who's the writer really doesn't seem to matter at all. So,
and that's been so pervasive for so long now that
right.
I think when somebody comes blasting out of the gates like Donny Cates,
yeah,
and he starts actually writing things that are way different than people have been used to, he sort of stands out as like a shining star. And his writing is good, but it's not like some great revelation. Like, he's not telling stories any differently than stories have ever been told. It's just the writing has been so mediocre in mainstream comics for so long that it's the first like offering of something truly different in a long time. I don't know how much of his stuff you've read. Have you read the Thanos, the Thanos, Baby Thanos and Thanos Must Die books, where he took Ghost Rider. He took Punisher, turned him into Ghost Rider, and turned him into Cosmic Ghost Rider. He became the Herald of Galactus.
Wow.
And then so Cosmic Ghost Rider is what he's now known as, has to travel through time and try to kill Thanos. And he causes all kinds of ridiculous time paradoxes. And Cable gets involved, and it ends up being Cable versus Cosmic Ghost Rider. And Cosmic Ghost Rider is basically the most OP character in the Marvel Universe right now. He can't even be scratched, let alone defeated, and he's insane. So even Galactus has turned on him. Right. You know, at this point, like, he's just gave him too much. He had to, between being the Punisher, who was already borderline crazy, then being Ghost Rider, which made him insane, and then giving him cosmic immortality. It's good writing. It's cool stuff. He reminds me of Mark Millar and his run on Old Man Logan. It was just a little bit outside the box. Just took the concept and just kind of tweaked it a little bit and threw some new cool stuff at it. Cool. Nothing groundbreaking, but still pretty cool writing.
There you go. But what I'm saying is, if, you know, as you were saying, the public perception of comic book writing at the major labels is that it's mediocre. And for that matter, if you go down to most of the indie labels, I mean, like Image Comics, there wasn't a writer among them when they were founded, you know? So
that's why I call Todd. That's why I call especially Todd the exception, because he did develop into a really cool writer with Spawn, and being able to draw that cool, and then being able to write something competently, that wasn't normal. That wasn't common, and I think that's what sort of gave a bunch of our generation, the guys that came up that are around. I think you're around my age. I'm 40. Are you near my age?
A little older, but yeah.
A little older. Well, we're probably still though part of the Image generation.
Right.
Did you jump on board at Spawn issue 1?
No, I was all right. So I worked in a comic book store between college and graduate school. So that was the summer of '95, and you know, like Image was the thing, and I remember people buying all the Gen 13 covers and stuff, and where are those people today?
Well, the point I was going to make was there's a lot of artists and writers that are now kind of establishing themselves on the indie circuit who grew up with that stuff and kind of had this idea of like, well, everybody writes and draws their stuff. So if I'm an artist, I can just go ahead and write some bullshit and it'll be fine. And it's not. So I actually have two problems. I'm going to get this off the screen real quick and make us bigger. Sure. I just wanted to talk about, we've spent 15 minutes talking about comics. We're actually here today to talk about card games, which is funny. But we're both comic creators, so it's fine. We can talk about comics the whole time if we want to. But I have launched the Strangeville Smoke Weed card game, which is now funding on Indiegogo. We're about to hit our $1,000 stretch goal, and we're going to do an 11 by 17 30 character poster from for the comic. It's going to be big, and we are here today to talk about collectible card games and whatnot. But let's stay on this. Let me just get rid of this.
Okay.
And then we will stay on the topic of comics as long as we want to, because we can do whatever we want. So I have two problems with indie comics today. One is artists who believe that they're writers just because they're the artist and they don't want to pay a writer. Writers don't get a lot of credit, or they don't get a lot of respect from comic book artists on the indie scene at all. They're sort of seen as a liability more than anything. It's like an albatross that hangs around the artist's neck. It's like, oh, geez, the writer wants this change, the writer wants that. And then the other problem I have is the grifters who come in. They aren't artists and they aren't writers, but they throw a concept out there and say, oh, let's crowdfund this. They pay $200 or $300 to get a couple splash pages done of a concept they have, not a script they've written, just a concept, an idea that they've had. They throw that up on an Indiegogo. This was, I don't know how successful that is anymore, but we really, all of us sort of got grifted pretty hard in 2017, 2018, and it was just a bunch of people with no experience at anything throwing up a couple of finished pages onto crowdfunding platforms, and then raising $50, $60, $70, $100,000, and then having to figure out how the hell to make a comic book. Right. Who had never done anything before. Now, I didn't start making comic books until about 2 years ago, but I have a 15-year history of making feature films and writing novels. So as far as formatting, putting, I did all the editing of my movies. I did all the creation of the DVD menus and all that stuff. And I have extensive graphic design knowledge and all that. So when it came to switching to comic books, for me, it was just a matter of I had to learn one or two things about how to format a comic book. But my knowledge base on how to put out a product was more than a decade old. So for me, putting out a comic book was no big deal. For these guys that come in and grift and make a buttload of money, which again, I don't know that there's a lot of those guys that are making a buttload of money anymore.
I think that well's gone kind of dry.
But those are my big problems. So the guys who aren't writers, who call themselves writers, and the artists who call themselves writers. Basically, there's a writer problem in indie comics. Yes. And it's a lack of experience on both. So it's not just the artist's problem, but it's also these guys that come in and call themselves writers and then can't write their way out of a paper bag. And there's still some of those projects, and some of them that I backed that are now 2 years late, and they're not even close to done because these guys don't know what the hell they're doing.
Yeah. Did you back Brand?
I did not. Thankfully, I did not.
Yeah, I did not either. But Mecca McCheese. So I'll just cite him so you can decide if he's biased or not. But he was like, man, this story's all over the place.
Now again, the art in Brand is really good.
It's great art.
That dude hired a great artist.
He did, yeah.
But and the same thing can be said for that Cyberfrog book. The art is, if you're into that, overly rendered style that Ethan Van Sciver has, the art itself can just catch you just as a pure art form. But the writing of that book is abysmal. Yeah, totally abysmal. That dude is not a writer. No, that dude shouldn't ever write anything ever again. He just can't. He can't do it. And it's just because he hasn't. And that's not an insult to people. It takes a long time to cultivate and develop a writing style and to sort of understand writing theory whenever it comes to this kind of product. It's not easy. I started with screenplays, and I was able to write independent screenplays when I was in my early 20s, and I wrote a fuck ton of them, and I just sort of learned the 3-act structure, and learned about character arcs and climaxes and resolutions and all the different elements that go into writing a story. And then you can sort of tweak that when it comes to novels, and you can tweak it even more when it comes to comic books. And but you have to have that base. You have to jump in somewhere. You have to write short stories, you have to write novels, you have to write something. You can't just draw pictures and then say you're a writer and you can draw sequential art, but you don't know how to write a story. You're gonna create a lot of problems for yourself and for your audience, and then ultimately for us guys like you and me who we are trying to do indie comics full time. How many comics do you release a year?
Well, I haven't been doing this long, but my goal is to do one a quarter.
Yeah. Okay.
About 4 a year.
So
let's see how we did this year. All right. So Guinevere 3. Yeah. All right. So that's I'm shipping that right now, and then Guinevere 2, I think was earlier this year, and yeah, and then White Lily 4, and now what might be knocking a little bit out of whack is my next project's going to be the White Lily trade paperback. So I don't know if that counts because that's going to be a collection of all the previously done ones.
It's still a project.
Yeah. Oh, so if we count that, then yes, 4, and then possibly 5 because I may be able to squeeze Guinevere 4 in. Like the art team's going to be working on it now, but probably won't launch until like December to January. That's where it's like, okay, is it this year or next year? But not bad.
No, doing an indie comic a quarter is a big it's a big undertaking, and to do it consistently and to keep the quality high,
right.
That's a hard job to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's fun. It's a fun as fuck job to do. I love doing.
Yeah, I really like it. I enjoy it, and I'm glad. I'm happy to be creating a whole new breed of competitors because to me, if you look at the people who are going to be coming out of my channel, they're going to be focused on story first, and I think that's going to make a pretty dramatic difference, and it will create a certain branding within that group. People go, oh wow, this guy's got good stories. So
yeah, and I think we've all learned from the grifting and the terrible customer relations and the Twitter wars over the last couple of years that, for me at least, one of the things we talked earlier, you said, what can you offer?
Right.
What do you offer as an alternative? One of the things that I offer as an alternative is my products are completely done and ready to ship before I launch my crowdfunder. So this card game has been completely developed.
Oh wow, neat.
Already done. These are my prototype
sure.
decks are already done. I've been playing them all year long. I've even got the rule book is done. Everything is completely done before I launched my product because as an alternative to the grifter nation out there on crowdfunding platforms, I want my backers to know without a shadow of a doubt you're getting your product and you're going to get it on time.
Yeah.
There are no excuses. The product is done before it launches. And I've noticed a few other guys have been doing the same thing, saying, listen, as an alternative to what the nightmare that a lot of us have had to deal with, crowdfunding books that take forever to come out, if ever, we're offering you the product basically up front. Like these are basically pre-orders where, and I saw something, I think it was a Twitter post last week that made me literally laugh out loud.
Cool. And
it was something like, how many hundreds of thousands do you need to be kickstarted before you're kickstarted, brother?
Exactly.
So there has to come a point where you no longer need the money up front from the fans to make the product. You've already made enough money that you can make the product on the front end and then sell it to the fans on the back end. Now, I like crowdfunding simply because it offers a measured it offers measured like progress, and you can throw in extras and incentives. And as a team, your fans and your backers feel like they're part of something. They're part of a team. They're helping create this unique experience that ends with them getting the product that they originally asked for, but then also some add-ons, along the way. And because I could just throw this, I could put this card game on my website and just sell it.
Yeah.
It would be, but there's no fanfare around that.
Right.
I really like the crowdfunding platform.
Yeah, exactly. It does. It does provide a, well, really at this point, I just look at them like eBay, right? Like you could make the thing and you could throw it up on eBay, but eBay doesn't have the perception to its end user that you can come here and find new products from independent creators that nobody else has. And that's what Indiegogo and Kickstarter offer is, you're getting something completely new first from some small person out there you've never heard of, and I mean, although exceptions, of course, Todd McFarlane just did $3 million. And that's what we're seeing is it started that way. And now people, are looking at it as a distribution platform, which it is, if you fact now, all right, I said this at the start of the year, and this has been a crazy year, so I don't know if the statement's true anymore. But at the start of the year, I got to say Kickstarter is the #2 distributor of comic books in North America after Diamond. Then Diamond split, and so it may be after Diamond and DC's new distributor thing, but still, Kickstarter distributes a lot of comic books, and you can look at them like that, and they create this hype around it, and they have this crowd there of people who are hungry. So yeah, if you've got a product, then you do want to throw it up and get people to get it. Not necessarily for the concept of I need the money, but for the concept of I match the profile. I'm a creator. This is a book that you can't get anywhere else, and it's from me. And there you go. So it's good where your unique selling proposition meets the platform's biases in the way it markets itself, I guess.
Definitely, and that platform can be taken advantage of, but I think people are getting wise to it. People are starting to figure out who there are a lot of red flags for what a grifter is gonna be like.
Yeah.
And I think we've been doing this long enough now and looking at this long enough that we kind of have an idea of when a grifter comes to town.
Yeah.
That they don't have anything prepared or anything ready.
No.
That they're to be avoided. And I hope
and their attitude is always it doesn't even matter, And
that's what's crazy. Their attitude is always like, yeah, I took your money. Who cares?
Yeah. Exactly.
It's crowdfunding. That doesn't mean you get anything.
Yeah.
It just means you give me money.
The money that you gave them didn't really matter. The quality of the book they're going to ship in return doesn't really matter. As I talked about on my channel, it's like we took part in a moment where I sold you this vision you wanted to believe in exchange for your dollars, and that was the transaction.
Yeah.
What you actually get doesn't really matter. And that's
what was that dude? Was Critias? Was that his name?
Yeah.
The guy that he tried to break down exactly how he spent everybody's money, and it was basically like I paid my rent and I quit my job. I quit my job and I paid my rent. And why do you think I owe you a comic book for that?
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
I think we're getting past that point, and I think that your show this week in Comicsgate have really helped to open a lot of people's eyes to the grifter like stereotype or archetype, because a lot of those guys have the same personality.
Yes,
same personality type. They talk the same way, and they get irrationally upset the same way. They treat people on Twitter the same way. Very short fuses.
Yeah,
they freak out very quickly when you start asking any questions whatsoever, or even when they just hang out with each other and try to just have like promotional streams. They get into fights and flame wars. They can't even spend 2 months, 2 nights a week with a bunch of other guys and not end up having these like insane ego challenges with each other. But I think they're easy to spot now. I mean, I think those guys. I actually, I am friends with a few Comicsgate dudes, and I have noticed that they sort of have kept on trucking, and they have really small creators that are doing really small projects now. And I always wonder, like, why do they keep themselves attached to that name? Because that name has, and I'm not even talking about the mainstream sort of SJW liberal side that like tried to paint them as all these terrible isms and things like that. I just mean the reputation for that brand associated with sort of the Ethan Van Sciver side of it, where so many of those projects either failed to deliver or failed to deliver quality. It's like, why would you even want to associate your name with that? And I guess there's a few.
There are still some whale buyers, but of course now the whale buyers are split now, right? But because Man of Sex is a whale buyer, from what I understand. He was talking about on one of the war campaign live streams that he spent like $7,000 on like Comicsgate projects that year.
Man, I probably spent 1,000.
Right.
I probably spent 1,000. I wouldn't spend $7,000 on indie comics, but
no.
there was a lot of cool stuff a couple of years ago. It was a big whirlwind, and there were a lot of cool looking projects. And thankfully, I only got burned on a few because, again, I sort of have this intuition with people. Like if I noticed that, because I never backed Cyberfrog. I watched Ethan for a little bit, and I was like, "This looks cool. This looks cool.
Right.
This dude is like some kind of this dude's got a larger than life personality." But the more he like spiraled, the more I realized like something's bad. Something's bad news here. And him and his friends, the people that he promoted the heaviest, I didn't back any of the books, and I think I'm
a lot of money.
Like when you asked if I backed Brand, it was too closely associated with Ethan for that. I didn't back any of what's his name, Malin. I didn't back Malin's book. I didn't back who's the orange man, the orange Australian man.
Oh yes, Liam Gray.
Yeah, I didn't back his crazy book. Although I think you guys were a little bit too hard on those books. I think they look really cool. I'm sure they're written like shit, but he did get a cool artist. Was it you? Did you play those? No, it was a different stream that somebody edited together a bunch of clips of Liam claiming to have taught the artist how to draw, even though Liam doesn't know how to draw. And said that he made him break his hand. Drawing so much. That dude's fucking crazy. That dude's out of his fucking mind. But I thought the comic looked cool. Like that artist has a cool style.
Well,
he drew some really cool pictures.
It's there if you want to go get it, right?
I do not want to go. I don't want Liam Gray knowing my address, man. Fuck that. Fuck that. Fuck that. Fuck that. Okay, so let's talk about let's switch over and talk about. Go ahead and plug your stuff real quick, though. You did once already, but let's just make a concise plug here. Preston runs POCKETJACKS Comics, and he has several different titles that he produces and has fulfilled all of them. There's yet to be a project that's been stalled out or delayed or sent out late, right? You're a consistent man.
Exactly.
Consistent man, on time, delivers high quality.
And I always thought it's strange when I would interact with people, and they're gonna be like, "How can you hope to succeed in indie comics without your e-celeb coming down and blessing? No one will ever know who you are." I'm like, no, it's actually pretty simple. You offer a good product at a fair price, you deliver quickly with good customer service, and people
do that consistently over and
over. You grow, right? It's not hard. You don't need to, go out and say "Hail Caesar" or anything. Like
that was such an easy way to make $25,000 though. There for about 2 years.
Yeah. But what I find telling is going back to looking at the people that he did promote. They were defined for the most part by being bad. And the latest being Adam Post, whose quality seemed to go down, quite frankly. Like the first one where it wasn't promoted by Ethan and he only made $5,000 in his initial campaign. College of the Dead 1 seemed like a decent book, but then College of the Dead 2, which Ethan promoted, ended up being a total shit show. With like the bizarre margins and stuff, so that like every panel was exactly the same. And they made the margins real big so that he could squeeze it out to being the magic 48 pages, which means now I get to charge you, $25 for it.
Making consistently high quality comic books is fucking hard, man. It's hard. But it's like it's almost, if you get too much success too quickly, it's almost a hindrance, because now you're expected to be able to produce that stuff, and it's difficult. Like I said, I've made feature films that took less of a toll on me than doing the current comic book I'm doing. I'm doing a 150-page graphic novel right now, and I'm writing it, penciling it, inking it, coloring it, the whole bit, lettering it, the whole bit myself. And I love it. I love every second of it, but it's the hardest fucking, like, hard as far as like labor wise. It's the hardest thing I've ever labored to create artistically. Right. And that's a guy that's done 7 feature films telling you that. Because when I make a feature film, I'm just the director. Yeah. It's harder. Obviously, it's harder to get 25 people to share your vision and come together and have a cinematographer and a bunch of actors and an editor and special effects guys. That's its own sort of set of skills, but they're not labor intensive skills. Right. You just find people that are enthusiastic about your project, and then they help you, and then your project's done. When you are solely creating a comic book yourself, it is 8 or 9 or 10 hours a day every day, and that goes on for months and months and months and months and months, and that breaks some people. If you get too much success too quickly and you're expected to perform like that full time, some guys don't want to work that hard. Yeah. A lot of guys in comics are lazy guys. They like to lounge around and read comics. They're not trying to work for a living. And when you put them in that position, it breaks them. Yeah. I think that's Ethan's problem. Ethan Van Sciver doesn't want to work hard. No, absolutely not. No, none of those people do. Here, let me go to my. I'm gonna find some of my my older tweets here because I shared out the cover for what's going to be coming up. Since it's now time for me to pimp my wares. Or maybe I do have to go to Kickstarter. But yeah, for the most part, I work on Kickstarter. Like, it just seemed like that's where my audience was, and on occasion maybe I'll go over to Indiegogo. Like I'll go over to Indiegogo for things like White Widow, but largely you can find me on Kickstarter. And here is so that is the main cover of Guinevere and the Divinity Factory 3. So fucking killer yeah. Fucking cover. Yeah. So my policy. And again, like I put a lot of thought into, okay, what do I communicate to my audience and how? So the main covers of my books, my policy is they always have to be done by the team that did the interior. So you now can see from the cover, like the quality of the interior artwork you're going to get. Like that's a beautiful cover, and you're going to get that on every page. And then that's a great idea. I actually had considered having somebody else do some covers for me for my books, but I was like, you know what? They need to see my style because I'm not that good. I've only been drawing comics for 2 years, so I've got a really rough style. And if I give the cover to somebody that's a better artist than me, some people might feel ripped off by opening it up and being like, well, this isn't the same quality. Well, that's where, again, that's the main cover of the book, which I offer at my lowest price point. So Guinevere 3, which is going to be 23 interior pages. With that cover, and the campaign that's coming up in like 3 weeks or so, is going to be $10 delivered. So that free domestic shipping. So that's a good value in my opinion. Absolutely. But then, if you're willing to pay more, well, hey, Jamie Tyndall is going to be doing. He's just doing the color work right now. He's already done all the line work on his version of Guinevere for issue 3, and I'm really excited about that. And here's another thing that I can offer that you're not going to get from Marvel DC. Again, so this is my unique selling proposition, and really, as far as I can tell, you're not going to get this from anybody, or at least very few. Yeah, no, I don't know of anybody doing this. So Jamie Tyndall, he's really hot right now. He's going to be like J. Scott Campbell in 10 years or so, I think. I'm limiting the covers the copies I'm going to issue of his cover to like 200. So can you imagine getting like 1 of 200 of a book by a hot artist? I think that I've actually been thinking about that lately. A lot of these books will actually be valuable collector's items in 10 or 20 years because of the scarcity, regardless of whether they're quality comic books or not, the fact that there's so few of them. Right. Some of these runs are so small that they're, by their nature, they're going to go on eBay for a lot of money. So that's where, again, now we're back to unique selling proposition, which is, hey, you can buy Marvel and DC, and they're going to have some cool looking covers. Sometimes the interiors aren't going to look like that cover. Right.
unlike what we have here, where
and none of them will be collectible because they're printing 2 million.
Yeah, and none of them are going to be collectible. Whereas I'm offering you one of 100 from Jamie Tyndall, or one of 200 from Jamie Tyndall. Like the Miss Sashi cover, that was one of 100. Like it's they're so rare that if you want to speculate on comic book collectability, well, you're off to a good start.
Creating collectible comic books, right? And doing so consistently.
Yeah, like say something happens to me like a year from now, and I stop doing comics or whatnot. You still got a cover from Jamie Tyndall that's one of 200.
Right. Exactly.
It's still good. So can you imagine if Jamie Tyndall goes on to be to be the next J. Scott Campbell? That would be having a J. Scott Campbell 1 of 200 from 10 or 15 years ago. That's going to be valuable in and of itself. So I feel like I'm offering my customers a good value, and
Definitely.
And I allow people to commission their own versions of my comic book. So because
I've seen that. I think that's a cool idea too.
So it allows multiple relations to multiple consumer bases, including some that are kind of competitor-ish, but still we can do some business. So why shouldn't we? And I just view it as multiple layers of distribution. You're going to have there's a local artist. For instance, if you did a cover, well then it would be you and your personality and your selling. You would be selling it to your audience, but they'd be getting my book, and they might go, "Oh wow, this is pretty good artwork. I kind of like the story. I want to see." So it's a win-win, and more people should be allowed to do that. And so that's kind of my vision on the whole thing, and I'm really happy with how it's turning out.
Hell yeah! Let's dig into the meat and potatoes here.
Okay.
The reason that I asked you, is it all right if I go ahead and take the cover out?
Yeah.
The reason that I became interested in having you on the show in the first place, it was, I believe, during one of your This Week in Comicsgate shows that you happened to mention that you used to do Magic the Gathering tournaments back in the early 90s.
I did, yeah.
And that fact, did you or did you not say that you placed third in the first tournament?
Yes.
It's a big deal. It's a big deal to me because and should be a big deal to people my age who played Magic the Gathering back in the early days. Now,
I was top 4 in the very first Pro Tour, and I was top 8 in the very second one.
So that is high level shit right there. And my ears perked up, and I was like, when I put because I was in the middle of developing my card game when I was listening to that show, my ears perked up, and I was like, I need to have Preston on when I launch this campaign so that we can talk about like deck building theory and collectible card theory and stuff. Because this game, have you ever played Munchkin? Do you know what that collectible card game is?
Yeah.
So I wanted to do some kind of like hybrid cross between Magic the Gathering and something like Munchkin. Munchkin is a single deck. You buy it once, and then you can add expansions to it however you want. So over time, you have your own unique version of Munchkin. You might buy one expansion, you might skip another. So over time, you have this sort of customized version of the game, but all the players play out of that one deck.
Yes.
My biggest complaint about Magic and what got me out of Magic over time was the idea of two players having dueling decks, but always having to buy the brand new cards and the brand new sets, and always keeping up with the collector side as opposed to the player side. I liked the gaming side.
Really, like, what is the long-term collectability of Magic cards? From my experience, I mean, obviously the first set will always have value, but the first set will always have value, but these sets where they're we're going to have this set and it's going to be in, whatever modern, current, whatever tournament format for the next 2 or 3 years. Okay, cool. And after that, what are any of those cards worth?
Yeah, almost none of them are worth anything. So you just so you've got this like conflict between the gaming side and the collector side. There are a lot of Magic card collectors that have never even played the game.
Mm-hmm.
They buy massive bulk amounts of cards in order to get those few rare cards and try to turn over. You know, if they get 5 of the valuable cards, it pays for all the 10,000 other cards.
They're dealers, basically.
Yeah. It's this weird marketplace of Magic cards, which I could give a fuck about. Right. I liked the theory of the game. I was attracted to creating themes and using the cards combo factors as efficiently as I could.
Right.
And as a young card player, I would say I got into Magic in '93.
Okay.
I think. And so I was part of, I guess you could call that second or third wave.
Okay.
The first wave was very, very small. Second wave was a little bit bigger. And the third wave was whenever the Magic smashed into all the comic and card shops.
Right.
And then and as soon as I saw the game available there at the comic book shop, I bought a deck and was hooked, absolutely hooked. And I got my friend base of about 5 guys into it. And there's actually, I didn't bring it over here. I meant to bring it over here. Have you read that book that's like the sort of concise history of Magic the Gathering?
No.
I forget what it's even called. It's on Amazon.
Okay.
There's a book that like sort of starts from the very beginning of when they developed the game,
sure,
and then goes all the way through probably the early 2000s. But anyway, they talk about in that book, they talk about sort of the first wave, or I'm sorry, that third wave, the big popular wave. That group of Magic players loved to create like 200 card decks that were full of giant creatures from all 5 colors.
Yeah.
And it would just be these unplayable, ridiculous decks. And when you sat down and tried to play them against each other, you'd play a 4.5-hour game of Magic the Gathering because it was just about putting all these giant creatures out.
Yeah.
And then hitting each other with them until I guess you just exhaust your deck.
Yeah.
But it was fun. It was funny because all the guys that I played were doing that same exact thing, just building these massive decks with no strategy and as many big creatures as they could.
Yeah.
When I read that in that book, I was like,
my deck is my collection kind of thing.
Yeah. When I read that in the book, I was like, I can't believe that was sort of like everybody that was playing the game at that time was doing that, because and maybe I did that at first, but I quickly started to read the rules on the card and realized the combo potential of cards. And then your sort of strategic wheel starts turning in your head. The smaller my deck is, the more likely I am to draw my cards.
Yes.
The more copies of those cards I have in that small deck, the more the likelihood of me drawing a combination that I want on the first or second turn, the probability goes up higher and higher.
Yeah.
What's that?
It's called combinatorics.
Yeah. I don't know that. You're the guy. That's why you're on the show. That's why we're talking about this. But so I looked at the rules. You can have 4 copies of a card, blah, blah, blah. The decks have 60 card minimums. So my cards would never, this is, by the time it's like 94 going into 95, my decks would be no more than like 75 cards.
Right.
And would be almost exclusively, 4 copies of this, 4 copies of this, 4 copies of this. And I would have these different themes. I would build different themed decks. I would have the black and blue deck that counters your spells, but also resurrects all my creatures from the graveyard, things like that. Or my green deck that utilizes the growth potential of mana, so that I can put those big creatures with trample out quickly. Maybe turn 2, I've already got so much green mana in play that I can bring out a card that costs 6 or 7 or 8.
Right.
And so I had all these different. I had a land destruction themed deck. I had a. Did you ever build a discard deck? It was just exclusively like a rack and what do they call that other one? There was
I built a necro deck.
Okay, what was that? How did that work?
Okay. That was the dominant deck of which going back to the very first Pro Tour where I did so well. I was playing the ante to the necro deck. Okay. But it was. Do you remember Ice Age?
Yep.
Okay. There's an Ice Age called Necropotence, which is now banned in type, or is now restricted in type 1 kind of thing. So Necropotence was a black enchantment, cost 3 black. You put it out, you now had to skip your draw phase, but you could pay life for cards basically.
Okay, so, I remember that card, but I never used it. How did you utilize it?
Well, it wasn't me. It was other people, and it was such a broken. You know, they would like their turn 1 Swamp, Dark Ritual, Necropotence,
and then they would draw 19 cards,
and then pay 3 life, boom, you know, and then you know, because you were just sitting there paying life for cards, your deck would develop very quickly, and you know, like they had the Hymn to Tarok, which was out of. Do we really want to get in discussion of Necro? All right, fine. Hymn to Tarok was out of Fallen Empire, or like that really one of those really bad sets, and it was 2 black to cause your opponent to discard 2 cards at random, and so you know, like Necro decks would have 4 Hymns to Tarok, you know, 4 Hypnotic Specters, and so they were like discard decks, you know.
Yeah, the way I built my discard deck, the Black Vice was the card that I was thinking of. The Rack and the Black Vice. So one of them gives you makes you
I know.
takes your life for discarding cards. The other for drawing cards. So no matter what you did with your deck, I was hitting you, and then I would have the cards that would you know, discard 5 cards or discard X, you know, depending on how many mana I tap.
That would be Mind Twist.
So, yeah, Mind Twist. I don't remember. It's been 20 years since I played these decks, so I don't remember the particular cards. But I remember the theories. I remember the game.
I haven't played the game in a very long time, but nevertheless, I'm just like Mind Twist. Yeah.
So I built that. I built that discard deck with no creatures.
Okay.
That was like my claim to fame here locally. Was I had this deck, this bastard of a deck that would destroy you in 3 or 4 turns, and I would never have any defense. Against anything you did, because I didn't give you time to do anything. So I was a real asshole player, and I would develop these really strong strategies to try to end you as fast as I could. And my friends didn't really like playing with me because they wanted to play those big 200 card decks, which was just, you know, dozens of creatures from all colors of the rainbow. Yeah, and I was the one strategizing. Right,
they're having a different. Well, yes, correct.
So what drew you to the tournament scene? Because there were local tournaments and stuff going on. That never appealed to me. I never wanted to go. And
I've always been someone who likes going to conventions. You know, growing up as a gamer, you know, you like BattleTech. You get to move around. You know, but you have to go find other BattleTech players, and so you go to gaming conventions. So that's where you met people. And then when Magic came up, it just seemed intuitive. Oh, you know, let's go to conventions. And so I went to a convention, and you know, I entered a deck out of, you know, my collection at that point was probably like 300 cards. And and I did really well in that tournament. You know, I made like top 32. You know, like I was kicking everybody's butt up until I ran into you know, Library of Alexandria, you know, Ancestral Recall, Time Walk, you know, kind of stuff. You know, I assume you know what those cards do, but the broken Type 1 cards, we would call. So you know, like I've, you know, it was just it was a game I enjoyed.
So were you a hardcore strategizer? Is that what got you as far as you went? Sort of ignoring the luster of collecting and focusing more on what individual cards did or what they did in combination with 2 or 3 other cards, and then trying to capitalize on that as quickly as possible. Remove as much randomness from the draw phase as possible. I don't think a lot of people in those early days really caught on to that. And I'm not sure when I read that book about Magic, I think that was sort of almost an accident. Like some of the cards were created with that in mind. Others, the players themselves sort of found, like they call that the meta. The meta of Magic was sort of developed in the field. And then it sort of as like feedback, Magic was like, oh, that's what they like to do. And then they sort of started to develop cards, and then it became what it is today, which is, you know, every card sort of has a purpose. Very, very few cards are just chaff to be, you know, discarded.
Which they had plenty of back in, you know.
That's what I mean. I don't think that there were a few things where like, oh, these would work cool together. But I don't think that the developers really realized that was going to be so important to the meta of Magic the Gathering, but eventually leaned into it, and then it became the most important part of
Yeah.
Magic. So those early days, it was guys like you, I think, that were pushing them in that direction. So how did you go from regional to ending up in third place overall
Um,
on the pro tour? Like, how did you even? Don't you have to be invited to the pro tour?
this was the very first one. So the very first one, there was literally an ad in Duelist, and you know, on a certain day, you just had to call in, and I called in, and I was in the pro tour.
There you go. There you go.
There you go.
Yeah. And what did you take with you? How many decks did you take with you?
Just one.
Just the one deck. Was that common then? Did everybody just sort of head out with one deck?
I can't tell you what other people did. I mean, you know, other people brought more cards, but well, it was amazing I even made it there. There was a blizzard and stuff, and I was flying from California. No. So
how far was it? How far did you have to travel?
From LA to New York.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So
did you drive?
No, I flew.
You flew, okay.
Yeah, but the flying, and so, you know, I got in on a red eye and stuff, and you know, I just arrived. I didn't even know where a hotel was, but it was just straight from the airport to the tournament site. You know, boom, I'm here. And
didn't they hold that first tournament in a card shop, or was it in a hotel?
No, it was in a hotel.
Was it? Okay. Yeah. And then how many games did you play?
I think I did like 8 rounds or something.
Yeah. And how did you just have to win one game per round, or did you have to play your opponent multiple times?
It would be best 2 out of 3.
Best 2 out of 3. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Was it held over multiple days, 2 or 3 days?
Yeah, 2 or 3 days.
And then as you sort of knocked down the opponents one after the other, were you like, oh shit?
Yeah.
Did you realize how good you were going into it, or were you just like there for the experience?
I can't tell you. Looking back, I don't know how good I was. You know, I think I had a clue, which was more than a lot of people. You know, but am I, you know, better than Mike Long? You know, I don't know. Probably not.
One of the things that I keep calling it that book because I'm a terrible host, and I won't go in the other room to my bookshelf and pick it up and bring it in here and get the title. But that book on Magic talked about, as the tournament scene developed, the players themselves started to get really nasty with the way they played each other. Did you experience that in the beginning?
Yes.
Nasty players?
No, I mean, in the beginning, no. Yeah, but it certainly became that. You know, look, that was really like the first experience with social media. Was Magic the Gathering was a community, and you know, late 90s, you know, like Usenet and all that stuff, and that's where you could start, you know, tournament reports and people posting, and that was where you know, the very first Flame Wars and chat rooms and all that stuff. That was really the first exposure I had to social media. So, you know, if people these days are like seeing what goes on and wondering, how does Preston stay so calm? It's because I've been doing this for a very long time. You know?
Yeah, and there's this whole new sort of wave of indie comics guys that again have no experience at all. So people might look at you or me and think that we just came out of nowhere. But I've been on the convention scene doing screenings of movies and stuff since 2006 was my first feature film, and my first tour around the country doing conventions and film festivals. So I've been at it a long, long, long time. And you do hold yourself as somebody that also has been in the game for a long, long time. And you sort of have to develop a thick skin. You can't you cannot get upset at people being stupid, because people will always, wherever there's a new thing, there are going to be all kinds of types of people. There's going to be good people. There's going to be talented people. There's going to be people that have your best interest at heart. And then there's going to be everybody else, which are usually awful, terrible people.
Yeah. And, you know,
they're there to take advantage of you.
And look, those SJW circles, it's a lot of terrible people there. Comic Skate circle, it's a lot of terrible people there. But I seem to be, you know, kind of going out and finding or working with a group of people who just want to make good comics and keep their customers happy, and I think that's a hell of a thing. So. Yeah,
well, there's comes a time in all these different scenes where the bubble bursts, and then all the grifters and all the flamers and all the trolls, they go on to the next thing. They go find the next thing, and then it just sort of leaves the people who had their best intentions, at heart the whole time.
Exactly.
I don't know if there's really much left to talk about as far as the card stuff goes. You said you did a second tournament.
Yeah, and the second Pro Tour was the very first draft Pro Tour. So
how'd you get involved in that? How'd you get drafted into that? Because of your third place?
Well, yeah, because now you had to get invited, but I was invited. So and that was cool. Excellent. That was in Long Beach.
And did you take just one deck to that as well?
It's draft.
Right. So you have to play from the cards that you open.
Yeah.
When you get there. So how did that change your strategy? Did you feel like?
Well, I mean, the first one was a constructed, and the second one was a draft. So it's completely different. But out in LA, we had a real Magic culture, and we played a lot. And we had discovered certain cards, and particularly Brian Weissman. I got to give him credit. He was really the first guy to show me how powerful this card called Pestilence was. Which
Pestilence,
yeah, and it was a common. It was a powerful common card, and it became like if you opened a pack in LA and you were playing draft and there was a Pestilence, you're like, I'm going black. Like, I don't care what cards get passed to me. I am dedicated to the color black because this card is amazing. And so I was drafting on day one in Long Beach at the Pro Tour, and I open up my pack and I'm like, oh, Sarah Angel. Okay, sounds good. Whatever, grab a Sarah Angel. Strong open pass, whatever, some card. So, so I'm like, okay, because I got a Sarah Angel, now I'm starting to get some white stuff, whatever. And then 7th pick, Pestilence. Oh, I'm like, okay, never mind. I'm going black now. So I ended up with a black-white deck because,
there you go.
Yeah. And it ended up with this funky combo. If I got all 3 cards, Sarah Angel with Castle. So all creatures that don't tap or that are untapped have +2 on their toughness with Pestilence. And, it was game over. But really, it was game over with Pestilence. I mean, if anything, it's like a cheap Wrath of God, against your opponent. If you don't have a lot of creatures, all right, everybody dies, and those kind of board wipers are just, but yeah, so.
And how good did you do in that tournament? What did you place in tournament 2? Top 8.
Yeah.
And then did you not get invited to the next one, or did you just choose?
I got invited to the next one. I went. I just, the level of competition and stuff had definitely changed. And, a lot of those early successes of like, you guys didn't know Pestilence was good.
Well, like you were saying about Usenet, a lot of the meta by that time,
right?
The third Pro Tour.
Yeah.
Everybody that wanted to obsess over it and just know the game inside and out knew it.
It became, and that's where you kind of probably saw the culture degenerate. You didn't have people playing it for fun. These were now like obsessive, autistic people on the internet, reading all the latest tournament reports and the deck reports. Did you know? Did you?
Yeah, mostly math. Autistic math majors who weren't playing the game even for strategy. They were playing the game strictly by numbers.
Right. So and that's. I never did well after that.
Hard to beat those guys, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
Did it take the fun out of it for you, or did you keep playing?
Yeah, I'd eventually stop. I just, even if, I just wanted to show up at a local tournament, like those people were so abusive and so, just horrible to be around. I'm like, this is not fun,
That's really that's kind of what kept me out of it, was being around, because I'd go to the card shops and I'd go to buy cards, and the other guys around me were so fucking weird, and they smelled bad. Yeah. And they just seemed like basement dwellers that would just like ooze their way out of the sewers to get involved in this thing. I was like, I don't want to sit around with these guys. Like, I had my own group of friends. We had a lot of fun. Yeah. We did a lot of what you would call in the Warhammer world. We did a lot of stuff that was more what is that term? When you just like follow the theme of the fucking game.
Oh, okay.
You would call it. I forget what the term is, but you basically you're not just trying to fucking kill each other as fast as you can. You're just trying to have fun and follow sort of the theme of the game. have fun themed decks that would do cool stuff, but they wouldn't necessarily win. You were just trying to do really fun, cool things with your decks, and not just be crazy autists that were trying to annihilate each other as fast as they could. But I got to the point where I just didn't want to fucking buy any more cards.
Yeah. Well, so the community got toxic, and the company became just a business of, okay, you're basically renting this set of Magic cards for the next 2 or 3 years, and then there'll be another set after that. And really, what could you do with your old collection? When the set changed?
Yeah, I have a buddy that still plays today, and he's got an armoire that's completely fucking full of cards, thousands and thousands of cards.
Right.
And he basically uses it like if a friend comes over that's never played before, he just pulls them all out and lets them build whatever deck they want to. But for all intents and purposes, they're just fucking taking up space.
Like it's and you're not look. Conversation I really have is, but you can make money. I'm like, the amount of money you can make playing Magic versus the amount of money you can make playing poker, night and day.
Right. It's interesting you say that, because didn't several of the winners of the early Pro Tours go on to
eventually you discover, like, well, I could just play cards,
they went on to play poker and make a lot of money on the poker.
And it's a much more enjoyable experience. You don't have to go on the internet and read the latest tournament report. The people are generally, better, or at least better acting.
And the game doesn't change every other year.
The game doesn't change. Yeah.
That was when I decided I want to make a collectible card game that is set in my fictional universe of all my movies and comic books. I wanted it to be something you could buy once, buy expansions for if you wanted to, but never have to.
There you go.
You could just buy this initial deck. It's 108 cards. Yeah. It's everything you need. Both players play out of the same deck. Cool. So it's not randomized. You're not buying. There's not going to be people buying 50 of these just to get the best cards out of it. It's just one. You just buy one deck once, and you can play it for 20 fucking years.
Sounds good.
That was my and it was really fun to develop, because I took all the stuff that I loved about Magic, of being able to create ridiculous combos, 2, 3, and 4 card combos, and it's all in here, but both players have the opportunity to grab those combos.
I mean, it reminds me, I guess, a bit of there's a game I got called Virtue Signal, which it's called Virtue Signal. It's the name of the game, and all the players are playing out of the same deck.
I put a bunch of cards in that allow you to. So if you draw a good,
I'm going to need to get back to shipping books here in a little bit.
Sure, yeah. No, I asked you for an hour. We're a little over. We talked a little bit too much about comic books early on. We'll go ahead and get out of here. Right. I appreciate you giving me the hour, and I appreciate you heading down memory lane there with me. I doubt anybody asks you about Magic the Gathering these days.
No. Yeah, I don't. I mean, strangely enough, like, I got an email like a year or two ago, like, are you Preston Poulter of the man? And like, yeah. And they were trying to run down some story. They heard an incident happened at some pro tour or whatever. They're like, do you know? And I'm like, I have no idea who any of these people are. And they're like, you were at the tournament. I'm like, that doesn't mean I remember them.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Well, I really appreciate you coming on. I figured this will give your audience something sort of different to hear, stories that they haven't heard from you recently. And then my audience gives them sort of an insight into what got me interested in doing cards in the first place. And I would like to actually, when this game comes out, I'd like to send you a deck. Okay. And get your thoughts on it if you play it a little bit.
Sure.
Get your thoughts on what you think of it, and maybe if there's some things you think maybe we could do better for the next version of it, or whatever. I think it would be cool to throw a deck your way once it comes out. But thanks a lot for your time. And one more time, how do people find you?
PocketJacksComics.com or YouTube, PocketJacks Comics, or Facebook, Kickstarter. You can eBay. I'm all over the place.
All right. So that'll about do it for us. Remember to back Strangeville Smoke Weed, the card game, on Indiegogo, funding now through October 14th. And thanks a lot, Preston.